All right, we are back talking about Survivor 41. Last night we got episode 4, and now it's time to do the power rankings, ranking each player by how likely it is they'll win from this point forward based on their position in the game and their edit that they've been receiving on the season. Now, there was quite a bit of movement on the list, not anything too drastic, like we didn't have anyone move entire tiers or anything, but there was a lot of people that moved around like one or two spots, a lot of people switching places from last week to this week. But let's dive right in and talk about the players. To start off the list at number 14, we have the boot from this episode. We have JD. Now, early on, Chantelle gives him his extra vote back, which, while it isn't great that he gave it up in the first place, is something, at least. He gets some content calling out Chantelle for holding secrets on other people while expecting him to be completely transparent. But after Ua loses the immunity challenge, the targets are between him and Jeannie. He tells Ricard and Chantelle about Jeannie's plan to use her shot in the dark to blindside Ricard. However, Chantelle goes back to Jeannie and convinces her to target JD. And the ultimate death nails when Chantelle convinces JD to give her his extra vote again. And at that point, it was pretty clear JD would be voted out, while Chantelle kept the extra vote for herself. So overall, I really like JD as a character, and he was a fun presence on the show, but he played a pretty terrible game this season. Now, right away, he had people like Ricard and Sarah become suspicious of him, and while he didn't get any votes at the first tribal, he was at least discussed as one of the targets there. After that, he isn't really able to reintegrate himself as people like Brad and Jeannie are targeting him. While he worked to make bonds with those two, that never really led to any game relationships, with Brad even spying on him and Ricard and thinking that JD had an idol, because that's not particularly great. He also allowed other people to catch him with an extra vote, which is just dumb. And ultimately, he was outplayed by Chantelle. Now, while an extra vote isn't worth that much in the grand scheme of things, the fact that JD gave it away not once but twice to Chantelle is pretty terrible, as it made perfect sense at that point for Chantelle to flip on him. Now, admittedly, he did get a bit unlucky that Ua lost as many challenges as they did in the pre-merge, but he still rubbed a lot of people on his tribe the wrong way, and he could have been voted out at any of the previous trial councils they attended. He also talked afterwards about how he wanted to flip Ricard and Chantelle from pretty early on, recognizing that they would be the biggest threats in the game, but he just didn't have the numbers to do so, where he was talking about how Brad and Jeannie were people that didn't want to make the optimal move. They were kind of more conservative players. And really, him working with Ricard and Chantelle, that was more done so out of necessity. Still, it's great that he is aware of his position in the game, but it's still not great that he wasn't able to build the social capital needed to make the moves that he needed to make. I also think he was someone that talked too openly about wanting to be a big player and how he represents this new era of the show and how he really wants to make a bunch of big moves. And that caused Ricard and Chantelle to target him further, like as they felt like he would be an unreliable ally in the post merge. So on the whole, JD was a fun character, and I think that if he were to come back in the future, he would have more potential. But on this season at least, he was a bit of a hot mess. So I have him here at number 14. Now we're moving on to number 13, the final 13 people still in the game. And at number 13, I have Erica. Now, this past episode was pretty interesting for Erica. I feel like this is the first time that we really got any meaningful screen time with her, where she gets to talk about how she has been playing under the radar and how she is trying to lower her threat level so that she can come out and show her teeth. We did finally get some screen time for her, but none of that made me feel confident about her chances. I actually thought that with the amount of screen time she was getting, there was a chance they were setting up a boot for her in this episode, with her talking to Deshawn about how she has been playing under the radar, which is immediately followed by a confessional from Deshawn of how he's suspicious of Erica for being under the radar. And things only go downhill from there when she tells Deshawn she wants to target Sydney, one of Deshawn's allies, which makes Deshawn not only go back to Sydney to relay this information, but also makes him and his alliance want to throw the immunity challenge to vote out Erica. So I thought this would have been the setup for a downfall episode to Erica, who, especially with the spike in content that she got relative to the first 3 episodes. But in the end, it wasn't meant to be, as Lulu won immunity anyway. So overall, things are not looking too peachy for Erica. She is not within the core alliance, and at this point, she trusts Deshawn way too much, despite him not giving her trust in return. None of that is particularly great, and while she was probably spared through Nasir's heroics in the challenge, I think this episode is setting her up as one of the targets should Luvu go to tribal in the next couple of rounds. Now, I think still the edit is leaning towards a Sydney boot. I think if Luvu does go to tribal before the merge, I can very well see Sydney being blindsided, but nothing we saw really screens out a winner edit to Erica, especially after she's barely gotten any screen time in the first 3 episodes. And I still think she'll probably be the target from that core alliance if Luvu goes to tribal. So because of that, I have Erica here at number 13. Now we're moving on to number 12, and we actually have someone who is in a bit of a similar boat as Erica, like someone that's on Luvu, hasn't gotten any screen time really until this episode. And while they haven't gotten as much screen time in this episode as Erica, I feel slightly more confident in their chances, and that is Heather. Now, episode 4 was a pretty bizarre one for Heather, where a lot of her focus came during the reward challenge, like how she was doing badly in it. Yet the episode was propping her up by showing everyone cheering her on, and then after she lost, she gets very emotional, and Danny comforts her because of that. So I feel like that is the main focus for her in the episode. Like we don't really get much outside of that. I feel like with Erica, we got a little bit more about what she's thinking gameplay wise. But the reason I have Heather above Erica is because of the fact that she is portrayed more positively than Erica. Like Erica is portrayed pretty negatively, I would say, with that core alliance like going after her and how they see her as this under the radar social threat moving forward. Whereas Heather, like I could see that moment, as strange as it is during the challenge, as being one of the more uplifting moments and more inspirational moments in the show. Like we even saw like right after the words, like when Jeff did his casting call commercial, he said that if you're not inspired by that, then you shouldn't apply for the show. So I don't know. I feel like the show is trying to prop up Heather a little bit more. But at the end of the day, like she's gotten very little screen time in the first 3 episodes, and even that, and even now, like we don't really get that much from her. So I still think she has no chance of winning. But the fact that she was portrayed more positively in this episode than Erica is why I have her here at number 12. Now we're moving on to number 11, and we're actually sticking with Luvu. And I think that says a lot about what I think about Luvu and their overall chances of producing the winner. But at number 11, we have Sydney. Now, this past episode was a bit better for Sydney, but it still wasn't great. Gameplay wise, she is being targeted by Heather and now Erica, but she is also within this core alliance with Danny and Deshawn, which got more focus in this episode, even if it was hinted at in the first 3 episodes. Deshawn even offers to throw the challenge in an effort to get rid of Erica and lower Lubu's threat level going into the merge. But obviously, with Sydney being the main target of the opposition, throwing the challenge isn't the safest position for her to be in, as a 3-3 tie is possible. But Lubu does win the challenge, so that's something. But on the other hand, I'm not getting great vibes from her edit. While she finally gets to talk about something other than the Nasir, most of her content still feels negative, as she talks more about who she's targeting and who she doesn't like than who she's actually close with, even if we actually see that in the episode. Again, like when you're looking at her confessionals, she doesn't talk so much about how close she is to Danny and Deshawn. She talks more about how she doesn't like Nasir or is back and forth on Nasir, and now we hear how she doesn't like Erica. So again, a lot of this feels very negative. And while she's gotten a consistent presence in each episode, none of that screams winner edit to me. I still think she's a likely target when Lubu goes to tribal, or even if they're able to win out until the merge, I could see her being the merge boot. So, as I feel like in that case, Yase and Ua would team up to take out the old Lubus, as they see the Lubus as having the numbers and therefore being a bigger threat. And I feel like through that, Sydney could very well be the first casualty based on the edit she's receiving. So I'm still not feeling great about Sydney. I have her a bit higher as I feel like she is in a better position right now, gameplay wise, than Heather and Erica. But like those two, I think she has no shot of winning. So I have her here at number 11. Now we're moving on to number 10, and we're actually going to be taking a bit of a break from Luvu. Not too long, but we're going to Ua, and we'll be talking about Jeannie. Now, episode 4 was more prominent for Jeannie than the last two episodes. Although I feel like a lot of that was because she was relevant to the plot rather than the edit trying to prop her up. Right away, we see her upset at the Brad blindside before asserting that she'll be getting her own food from now on. This is undercut immediately after Ua wins the reward challenge and have a survival expert come to their camp, which sets up the idea that the tribe doesn't need Jeannie anymore for gathering food, which isn't great. After the immunity challenge, she's in a pretty desperate position where JD is targeting her. Things are so bad that Jeannie even considers playing a shot in the dark. But ultimately, Chantelle and Ricard have other plans as they plan to vote out JD. Now, unfortunately for Jeannie, we don't see her do that much to make those two target JD. I guess you could say that her threat of her using the shot in the dark might have had an effect, but ultimately, I believe that Chantelle and Ricard simply saw Jeannie as more loyal and more reliable moving forward than JD. And the edit didn't really do anything to prop up Jeannie anyway. The biggest positive you can give Jeannie is that she didn't waste her shot in the dark, so that's something at least. But now there are only three people left on Ua, and if Ua were to go back to tribal, I think her and Ricard would target each other, leaving Chantelle as a swing vote. Now, while Chantelle has been shown to be closer to Ricard, I could very well see her cutting him to keep Jeannie due to her being less of a threat. That is a possibility. Even so, I don't see Jeannie winning this season as the edit hasn't done much to prop her up, and if she were to be kept around, it would have less to do with her gameplay and more to do with Ricard being a bigger threat. So because of that, I have her here at number 10. Now we're at number 9, and we're actually going back to Luvu, but this time we're talking about someone a bit more interesting, and that is Nasir. Now, episode 4 was pretty interesting for Nasir. He didn't get any confessionals, but at this point it seems like the target has shifted away from him, with Sydney being more focused on targeting Erica. We don't really see anyone outside the core alliance of Danny, Deshawn, and Sydney aligning themselves, although it seems like all three of these outsiders want to target Sydney in some capacity. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Obviously, Nasir's highlight comes in the immunity challenge, where he takes the charge and helping Deshawn, not realizing that Deshawn is trying to throw the challenge to target Erica. And in the end, Nasir is responsible for winning the challenge for his tribe, thus delaying the plans we've seen earlier for another week. Even so, we hear Deshawn in the confessional actually praise Nasir for winning the challenge, which I found a bit interesting. Overall, again, I don't see Nasir winning the game, although he was part of the reason why the episode was so fun. Also, with the knowledge that Erica and Heather want to target Sydney, I can see Nasir teaming up with those two should they go to Tribal and put a plan together. But with everything else going on, I have to leave him here at number 9. Now we're moving on to number 8, and we're actually finally going to be talking about our first Yase member, which is a bit interesting in my eyes. But at number 8, we have Xander. Now, Xander got pretty much no content in this episode, and considering that Yase is the more complex tribe, and the fact that they got a really big scene today after the reward challenge with them coming across the sea turtles, the fact that he doesn't get any confessionals during that is very troubling. You add that together with what we've seen in the last couple episodes for him, where it seems like a lot of his content has been circumstantial, where outside of him finding the Beware advantage and outside of him, getting summoned for all these different twists, we haven't really seen much from him. And I still don't feel like we know a lot about who he is as a person, which is a shame in my opinion, but I feel like it really harms his edit chances. Now, considering that he is on the more complex tribe with Yase, I did decide to have him a bit higher, and he has gotten at least some content that makes me somewhat think he has a chance. But considering everything else and considering the field that we're dealing with, I had to leave him here at number 8. All right, now we're going to be talking about number 7. We're actually going back to Ua for this one. At number 7, I have Ricard. Now, this episode was okay for Ricard edit-wise. He didn't really get that much content that would make me higher on his chances, but he was shown playing the game this round. After Ua loses the immunity challenge, we hear Jeannie talking to JD about targeting Ricard and using her shot in the dark to blindside him. And we heard from JD afterwards that he did try to get Jeannie to go move forward with this plan where he still had his extra vote and he could have gotten Jeannie to vote out Ricard while JD used his extra vote to ensure that that plan would go through. But apparently, Jeannie wasn't on board with the plan, so as it turns out, she was always voting out JD, so that doesn't really matter too much. But in any case, Ricard sticks close to Chantelle during a lot of this round, who is able to convince JD to give her his extra vote after already giving it back. And from there, the two determine that Jeannie is a better number to have for their side than JD is. Now, while this could be effective long term, as JD would have been more likely to flip later in the game, it also puts Ricard in a more precarious position in the short term. If Ua has to go back to travel before the merge, then Ricard is in a lot of trouble, as Jeannie is very likely to go after him, leaving him at the mercy of Chantelle. Now, while it seems like Chantelle is closer to Ricard than she is to Jeannie, it's very possible that Chantelle could cut him as a way of keeping around a more loyal number coming into the merge. So I don't think his path to the merge is entirely guaranteed. Now, do I think that Ua will lose another challenge before the merge? Not exactly. I think Lu is due to go to Tribal, especially after this episode focused so much on their dynamics. But I also think the edit has been ignoring Ricard enough to where I'm not super confident on him winning anyway. So I have to leave him here at number 7. Now we're at number 6, and we actually have someone who jumped up a couple spots from last week. I mean, they weren't super low last week, but I figured they were a bit more prominent in this episode. So at number 6, I have Danny. And we've gotten some evidence of this before this episode, but I feel like this episode all but confirmed that he is in a 3-person alliance with Deshawn and Sydney, and that alliance seems to be the core of Luvu at the moment, leaving Danny in a pretty good position. Deshawn approaches them with the news that Erica is targeting Sydney, which prompts them to want to target Erica. But also, Deshawn proposes throwing the challenge in order to get rid of Erica. And Danny seems pretty conflicted about this, as we get a confessional of him talking about being a competitor and always wanting to win. But by the time the challenge starts, he seems to be going along with the plan, even if Deshawn is doing most of the work. But ultimately, none of it matters, as Luvu ends up winning the challenge anyway. So overall, I think Danny's in a good position for the time being in his core alliance. Now, long term, I think he could be in a bit of trouble. I mean, I think I said earlier that I think Sydney is the more likely pre-merge boot, or at least the first one to go from Luvu. So in that case, that would require his alliance to be blindsided, or if not, him being forced to abandon one of his allies to make that move happen. But even if things are all right there, I mean, I feel like at the merge, like the fact that Luvu will be going in with numbers leads them to be targeted potentially by a Yase Yua alliance. And I feel like if that were to happen, Danny will be in a lot of trouble. I feel like he is someone who, just due to his physical strength and seeming to be an out in front leader, could be targeted simply due to that. And beyond that, I don't think the edit's really doing much to back him up. I mean, he didn't get much content in episodes 2 or 3. So I feel like a lot of this spot has to do with him position wise in the game and how he's doing as well. But I don't see him as the winner. Really, I feel like most of these people have no shot of winning at this point. Or if they do, I don't see how it's playing out in the edit. But I have Danny here at number 6. Now we're at number 5, and we actually have someone who dropped a couple spots. I mean, kind of like Danny, but in reverse. I mean, I feel like this person had been getting a good edit the last couple episodes, but I feel like this episode was kind of a drop-off point a bit. And at number 5, I have Lyanna. Now, I was a bit disappointed in Lyanna this episode. She didn't really get that much content in the episode. Now, while it's okay to have episodes without confessionals, I feel like the scene after the reward challenge where Yase watched the sea turtles was such a powerful moment and really a turning point in Yase for me, where I feel like I'm pretty confident that a Yase person has the best shot of winning. So to see that happen, yet Lyanna doesn't get any confessionals or any moments to talk about her experience thus far, while leaving that more to Evie and Tiffany, was pretty underwhelming. Now, I still think, based on her first 3 episodes, she has a shot. I mean, she is supposed to be a bit quieter than some of the other people that are more blatant winner contenders at this point, but the fact that she didn't get that confessional during the sea turtle scene was enough to make me drop her here to number 5. I still think she has a chance, but I feel like that episode was a bit disappointing for me. Now we're at number 4, and we actually have the highest ranked Lubu member left on the board. We have Deshawn. Now, this was a pretty big episode for Deshawn, and really Lubu as a whole. Right away, we learned that he's within a core alliance of himself, Danny, and Sydney. But we also see some of his relationships outside that core, particularly with Erica. Erica trusts him a lot to the point where she tells him that she wants to target Sydney. And that in turn prompts Deshawn to go back to his core alliance with this information, thus making Erica their next target. But along with that, Deshawn proposes to them a plan to throw the next immunity challenge to target Erica, but also to avoid an unintentional Tandang, where Luvu members would be targeted post-merge by the two smaller tribes simply because Luvu has a numbers advantage. I found that moment pretty compelling as it demonstrates Deshawn's game knowledge. So the Core Alliance moves forward with this plan of throwing the challenge, with Deshawn getting a lot of the focus there, even having confessionals in the middle of the episode, which I thought was pretty entertaining. But it's all for naught, as Nasir, unaware of the plan, takes charge and wins the challenge. So overall, this was a good episode for Deshawn, as he gets the most focus of the Luvu tribe, and he's in the best position gameplay-wise. I think he's the best player on Luvu and has the best chance of winning among the people on that tribe. Now, it wasn't great that he was kind of undermined by Nasir winning the challenge despite him getting so much content of him talking about the benefits of throwing it. I don't think that's particularly great. Um, Even so, I don't think a Lubu member is winning this season, and the fact that they again won another challenge only increases the likelihood of Luvu being targeted post merge. So I don't think it's particularly great that Deshawn was making all these points only to be undercut. But even so, while I don't think Deshawn will actually win, I feel like he has the best shot out of anyone still left on Luvu, and I feel like he can prove himself in the post merge. So because of that, I have him here at number 4. Now we're at number 3, and we're going to be talking about someone who has, again, gotten a pretty strange edit so far, but I feel like this past episode was pretty good for them. And we have Tiffany. Now, episode 4 was a solid bounce back week for Tiffany. After winning the reward challenge, Tiffany has a great confessional about how she's been doing better in challenges. Considering the show focused on her poor performance in the early episodes, this confessional is continuing a growth arc for her, where Tiffany is getting better week by week. While she tries burying this observation under talk of teamwork and momentum, the focus on her character development is intentional. She also shows her tribe a flock of baby sea turtles heading towards the ocean, so that's something. So overall, I think this episode was pretty strong for the Yase tribe as a whole, furthering my belief that they are the most complex tribe and the tribe with the most amount of winner contenders. And I think Tiffany is one of those contenders. Now, she has gotten some negativity and weirdness in her edit, and you could say that her having this growth arc and her having this bit of a journey probably means she won't win at the end. But I feel like, again, given the field and given how she's been getting this content since premiere, I feel like that is enough to leave her here at number 3. So I'm pretty high on Tiffany. Now we're moving on to number 2, and we have the highest ranked member of Yase. We have Evie. Now, episode 4 was pretty strong for Evie. Once again, the show is trying to give them a cooldown period, limiting them to just one confessional instead of the 19 we got in the first 2 episodes. But the content they got was pretty good. After the reward challenge, Evie has a pretty fun, lighthearted moment where they do a previously on Survivor segment to highlight how Yase is on the upswing. A bit later, the tribe comes across a flock of sea turtles fighting through the sand and moving to the ocean. It's through this visual that Evie delivers a confessional comparing Yase to the turtles, of how they struggled with early losses. No one thought the Yase tribe would do anything in the game, but they've had a bounce back. While Tiffany also gets a confessional about Yase gaining momentum, the fact that Evie gets to say a similar thing with some pretty strong visuals to accompany it is pretty good for their edit. And again, I feel like Yase is one of the more developed tribes. I feel like it has the most amount of strong contenders. And I wouldn't be surprised if the winner ends up coming from this tribe. And Evie is one of the contenders. There's still the concerns about them being a decoy winner. I mean, that is obviously a concern. but I feel like again that we've had this slowdown period for them, and we're still getting a checkup from them, so that's definitely a positive sign. And because of that, I have Evie here at number 2. Now we're at number 1, the person I believe is the most likely to win Survivor 41. And I actually had a bit of a debate about this one, as again, this person is not on Yase. I feel like I'm very high on Yase, especially after this episode. But this person had such a big episode, and they have so many things that make them a strong winner candidate that I just can't ignore it. So at number 1, we have Chantelle. Now, episode 4 continues with Chantelle being a pretty prominent figure on the season. Right away, she tries calming Jeannie down by telling her about secrets she's kept with other players. And admittedly, this isn't the best gameplay move, as it makes JD leery of her. We even get a confessional about JD talking about the double standard of Chantelle like having all these secrets to herself while expecting JD to be more open. But since JD is the boot of the episode and we're supposed to see Chantelle as the person that takes him out, that's not too much of a negative in my eyes. So then after the immunity challenge, we see Chantelle again being a part of the action, with her wanting to target JD, but along the way we see JD try to get in with her. And through that, Chantelle convinces JD to hand him his extra vote again after handing it back to him at the beginning of the episode. JD did this in a last-ditch effort to build trust with Chantelle, and from that point on, it becomes clear that Chantelle was going to vote out JD, as it would allow her to keep the extra vote without having the baggage of having JD asking for it back. She gets to keep around Jeannie, someone that doesn't like Ricard and would probably go after him over her should you go back to Tribal. And along with that, we once again hear the hum that Chantelle gave at the beginning of the season, letting us know that she'll be a recurring aspect to her character. Now, is it guaranteed that she'll win? Not necessarily. Again, I think Yase has is the most complex tribe, and I think through that we could see the winner come from that tribe. I mean, obviously Chantelle isn't a part of that. Like she hasn't gotten, the type of content that Yase has gotten. And like Evie, I could see Chantelle potentially being a decoy winner. So I don't think this number 1 spot is entirely secure. I could definitely see Chantelle moving down in the future. But based on the field, I feel like she has gotten the strongest content at this point. I feel like she is a pretty strong player that's pretty well positioned. I feel like she'll continue to be a big player moving forward. And I feel like, again, based on the episode we've gotten and what we've gotten so far, I kind of have to put her number 1. Now, again, I could move her down, like as I feel like, again, at the end of the day, Yase is the most complex tribe. And if she were to be voted out, I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. But for the time being, I'm going to leave her here at number 1. And there we go. That'll do it for the episode 4 power rankings of Survivor 41. Now, this has been a really fun season so far. I mean, next week we're going to have the next episode, possibly another interesting tribal council, and certainly more fun character moments along the way. And along with that, I'll continue to be doing these power rankings, like to see how these characters and players grow throughout the season and see by the end of it whether I am able to predict the winner or not. So that'll do it for the video, and I'll see you all next time.